thanks for having us. My name is Kate Wolf-Liga. I think I know everybody here, which is kind of fun. And I am the Director of Counseling Services, and I'm joined by Kyle, our Outreach Coordinator at Counseling Services, and one of our senior counselors for supporting student mental health and meeting our own needs. We got some feedback that folks had an interest in hearing more about how faculty and staff can support themselves, through this time. We obviously have a lot of focus on students in a lot of the outreach activities that we're doing or things we're being asked to do. And I think kind of bridging that gap was being solicited from us. So we're hopeful that this is helpful to do a little bit of that today.
Yes, appreciate you all being here.
So Kyle, do you want to, we've got a Canva presentation, just so you don't have to look at us the whole time. But we're not going to spend a whole lot of time with content. It was just another option for us. So Kyle, are you able to share that?
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Okay, that's visible?
Yep. Perfect. Have at it.
All right. So, for the sake of mental health, but also just settling, I think we all know that busyness of going from meeting to meeting, having a bunch of things to attend to. I think it's important, no matter what we're doing, to just settle in the activity that we're involved in. And I figured it would be nice to start that way. So if you're comfortable in whatever situation you are in, if you're in a seat, just putting your feet on the floor, putting your arms kind of at ease, whatever feels comfortable in your body, just help yourself get to a state of settled. And just notice if you're holding any tension anywhere. A lot of us hold tension in our necks, our shoulders, backs, legs. So just notice if anything feels particularly tense. Can you just lessen that a little bit? Bring relaxation where it needs to be. And we'll just take a nice deep breath together. So whenever you are ready, you can take an inhale in. Feel your lungs fill up. And then a slow exhale out as you need to. And just feel yourself settle into the space. Again, focus on your body. Notice if you're holding any tension. Notice if you can make any small adjustments to bring some ease to things. And we'll take another deep breath in, a little bit bigger than the last one. And then a slow breath out. And so as we talk today, notice what you feel as you're feeling it. So pay attention to your internal reactions. Notice when things start to get tense, or if you can find peace and ease. And remember to keep those breaths there as a place to just keep you grounded through these topics. So thank you all for coming here and settling, and we'll jump into some things we've got prepared here. So I guess I wanted to preface all of this by saying, I think we are constantly hearing self-care is so important. Self-care your problems away. And I think it's really important that we just acknowledge self-care isn't going to solve everything. Right? We are going to have practices that are really beneficial for us and helpful for us. And I think sometimes we get lost in the idea that there are problems beyond just what we can do to take care of ourselves. So those systematic problems and just being able to kind of understand our dynamics where we are. So I think it's important to stress that while the message of self-care comes from a good place and sometimes is just overwhelmingly said to us, it's also important to acknowledge that it does have its benefits. It provides us a place to hold capacity for some things that are important, like hope, making sure that we are grounded to attend to bigger issues, feeling connection to address some of the bigger stuff that we deal with. So know that those are important practices, even if they're not going to solve anything. And just wanted to acknowledge that, because I think as mental health counselors, we hear it a lot and we put it out there a lot, but we also know that there are things beyond just what the individual can do.
So we have kind of a little list of things that, it's interesting because a lot of times people do think of self-care, which is kind of he said much more nicely than I would, that, I mean, self-care has become very much a buzzword. And I think, self-care feels very intentional, which is great. And I think being able to intentionally engage in activities that aren't necessarily productive in traditional ways can be hard for all of us to do. So whether you consider this part of your self-care or you think of it as more of a separate domain of like leisure, being really intentional about that stuff. So being in nature, it's very well researched, the effects of it. There is a belief about kind of like the vibrations of energy that come off of trees and some of that stuff. It's theoretical at this point, of course, but there's a lot of important work that's been looked at there, and the impacts, the beneficial impacts for us. Certainly movement. Laughter is a huge one for me. Anytime I can find a really funny show or whatever, I can get lost in that and feel some good belly laughs, and recognize that sometimes that inverted experience of, by smiling, my mood boosts. I get the benefits of that. So being able to connect to loved ones, taking risks, feeling like you're challenging yourself and feeling stimulated in different ways. Scheduling your rest. We're in a culture that oftentimes feels like rest is a reward for hard work, and rest, in my opinion, should not be used in that way. We all require rest. A lot of our creative processes require rest. So it's something for folks to keep in mind. And honestly, I would encourage you to share that with your students as well. You need to hear this, but I'm hopeful that you can also share that with your students. And then ensuring that you can ask for what you need. I do think one of the struggles that I've found, just in talking with a lot of colleagues, is that we became really isolated over the last couple of years in many ways. And so we've distanced from each other in unexpected ways and in unintended ways. So being able to go a little outside of that new comfort zone that we may have acquired in this last couple of years, and being able to ask for what we need, I think is a really important piece of what we do now. So in terms of resources available to you, if you're feeling disruption, certainly this goes beyond just feeling like a traditional disconnect. This is going to be a little bit more feeling like you're experiencing disruption, distressed in any kind of domain of your life where you want that support. So certainly we've got an EAP program here on the campus. I know it's changed a little bit because we don't have a local resource, but from what I'm hearing from some folks, they actually appreciate that it's going straight to the state, because it, I think, provides a little bit more privacy for people who are interested in seeking some support services. Liberty Resources Mobile Crisis. So if you or someone you care for or someone important in your life is experiencing a mental health crisis, oftentimes law enforcement is the responder in those situations. We're working really hard as a community, but particularly on this campus, we have a memorandum of understanding, or a services agreement, excuse me, with Liberty Resources Mobile Crisis Program, so that they can come onto campus and actually provide a mental health assessment for somebody who is in distress, who's in crisis. It's just a really nice program. Obviously, this is something that is going to be a little bit more acute in nature, but just something that you should be aware of. There's also other services attached to this. There are other crisis-related services, including a crisis respite house. I can't remember what the other two are, but we have this link that we'll share out towards the end of this as well. But that number will get people to all of their crisis services. And then Psychology Today is often where folks will find referrals for therapy. So psychologytoday.com allows you to search by provider demographics, by their specialty, and it also allows you to search by the type of insurance, commercial or third-party insurance products that the provider will accept. Many of you may be aware that it is hard to get in with therapists right now. But we also have traditionally been willing to consult with people. I've had a lot of people call me over the last several years asking me, like, who would you recommend if you were going to go to a therapist in the community? And so try not to go too far with that, but I will nudge people in a certain direction and share what I know about who's accepting referrals now. And I think anyone here would be willing to do that with our colleagues.
I'll also mention there for Psychology Today, there's a lot of mental health providers who are still operating remotely. So you can look all around the state for a provider if you're feeling like one in your area might not meet your needs or doesn't necessarily click. There's a lot of different options right now, and setting up even a lot of them are offering these free 15-minute consultations. So you can just get to know them and ask some questions before you agree to start up services. So just know that there's difference of availability with all of the stuff that's come with remote work.
Okay, so maybe we could pause the recording at this time, or just
student interaction and just trying to attend to the needs. As Liz said too, just feeling trained and knowing a little bit about how to handle situations that may arise, especially when they involve someone else's mental health. So we have some basic skills and resources that we wanted to share in navigating that. But I definitely know that struggle. I think it can be really overwhelming when a student comes to you in their own sense of crisis, not really knowing how to explain what's going on, or just emotionally spilling out because they really haven't been able to talk to anybody. And those are really important moments that come with a lot of pressure, right? The student feels comfortable to approach you, trusts you enough to offer, this is what I'm going through right now, this is what I'm feeling. And then from your perspectives on the other end of that, I don't want to mess this up. I want to be able to handle this and know where my limits are, what my boundaries are, and be able to feel like I'm helpful to the person in front of me. So some of the skills that we have here, I think, can be really useful for that. But it does go beyond that to some of just how do you connect with your colleagues, your peers as well, and making sure that we're all able to hear each other and be supportive of one another and know how to feel like we can ask for what we need as well. So this is some common practices that are used and basic counseling skills and just listening skills in general. So some of this might seem familiar to some of you, but it goes with the acronym SOLAR. So squaring up, just being able to face the person who's in front of you, really giving them like the full body experience of, okay, I'm here to listen. I'm here to attend to like what's going on. That open posture. So just being attentive to your body language. The more closed off you might be if your arms are folded or you're kind of turned away and kind of hunched over, it doesn't present this openness that maybe someone needs to feel warmth and invited to continue speaking and talking and sharing. Leaning in, obviously, if you're attending to someone in front of you, just being able to show that you're engaged in the conversation and there. Eye contact, obviously this is culturally different depending on someone's background, maybe the environment they were raised, the culture that they were raised in. So just knowing how to balance that, being attentive to when someone is very uncomfortable with that kind of eye contact, and then knowing that there is at least some ability to balance and attend to someone's needs as they're experiencing it. And then relaxed. So this one I think is really, really important because when someone brings something very stressful to you, you might feel your own nervous system, your own activation. So how do you attend to your inner workings and be there for someone else? And I think so much of what we started this presentation with, that take a deep breath, attend to what's in your body right now, that can really help with those relaxation practices. Notice where you store tension, stress, all of the things that come up when you're listening to someone's story. And then can you just make those adjustments by slowing things down? Because naturally, when we're engaged in that, we're doing co-regulation, right? Like we're able to attend to someone else's needs and our own needs at the same time. And that helps someone to feel settled. If you are this calming presence, you're able to say, you're feeling a lot right now. Can we just take a breath together? It helps someone to feel connected and you're both going through that experience. So knowing how to relax yourself can also contribute to helping someone else to feel a sense of relaxed.
Yeah, and the other thing I just want to add to this is I think when you can be kind of aware of yourself physiologically and how you're going to use yourself to connect with another person, it may also help you in times where you do feel like, oh my gosh, I have this student who's approaching me with this crisis. Now I have to fix this thing too. I got one more thing. It may also help you to reduce a little bit of that so you don't have to go into problem solving mode. A lot of times, the feedback that we get from students is that they just needed to be heard. They just needed to share in their story with someone. Maybe they need to be pointed somewhere perhaps, but a lot of times it really is just that they needed somebody to have empathy for their experience because they're having a hard time connecting with students here. They don't have social connections here at the college, whatever that might be. So hopefully you can help manage that in this way too.
So I think this can be useful for you all to have just for yourselves. And then for anyone who is running anything group related, so that could be a classroom experience or some kind of workshop or program, this stuff can all just be really handy when it comes to helping to put people in a settled state to start and begin something. So I put the QR code on here so you have access to the handout itself, but it presents 30 grounding techniques. And I've been talking to a lot more faculty about the idea of just running something very brief at the start of a class or a program that involves that. It can take up a minute, 5 minutes, whatever you're able to give in that setting. But because we all know that rushing around, busyness, I'm late to something, I show up, I'm flustered, I'm anxious about sitting in a different space or a different seat. And then on top of that, all of the pandemic concerns. So can we just encourage people to settle and feel grounded? And like I said, some of these can take like a minute out of the time. So if everybody arrives, doing a practice like this just helps us to feel like we're in this space together and we're here and now. Because a lot of times students, faculty, staff, everybody's carrying so much into a space with them. So how can we put down what we can't attend to in this moment to be where we are, to feel our best and attend to what we can? So some of these I think can be really helpful. Some of them might not be useful depending on your situation and your space and what you have access to, but they're all good to experiment with and know which ones work for you that you can also encourage other students to be partaking in as well. So those are rooted in physical sensations, sensory experience. How do you get into your body? Mental grounding, so being able to work with some overwhelming thoughts, negative thoughts, patterns, getting stuck and ruminating on things. How do we get ourselves out of those? And then soothing practices, which goes along with rest, taking care of our physical being, our body, just being able to attend to what we need for ourselves. So just 3 different categories that you can consider as you're working through that. But yeah, so some practice.
Okay, so this is just in here, not because I expect people to read it, but hopefully everyone would have received the optional syllabus statement from the deans of your colleges or from whomever else I have got. Anyway, we did want to include it here with the QR code, so you can look it up. We've got the Google Doc out there that you can link to, so you have the opportunity to add this if you haven't seen it before and you wanted to have something with resources in it for your students for a future semester, that type of thing. So we'll make sure that we get that, and hopefully it's something, we'll look at ensuring that it's revised appropriately every semester and hopefully be able to send it out routinely, at least at the beginning of an academic year, but hopefully it can be of some help.
And I'll add, anecdotally, I've heard from students how relieving it is to see something like this on a syllabus, to know that their professor is attending to mental health and sees that as a priority. It's helped some students to feel more comfortable approaching professors in that way. So I wanted to share that because I've heard that directly from different students. But just being able to bring it into the the space a little bit so that we can talk about it openly is really important. And again, the QR code should take you to a Google Doc if you don't have access to it already. That way you can get that. And then next up, we had discussed just different levels of need because for students, as we're going through different challenges, sometimes it's hard to know what we need and how to attend to those needs. So being able to offer different resources that match maybe what the need might be can be really helpful because it helps to bring things to be less overwhelming to someone who's in the moment of overwhelm or struggle. And then it also helps us to feel connected to the community of resources we have. So we've talked about this in 3 different stages of mild, moderate, and then crisis level. Obviously, crisis is subjective to students, right? Like what might be a crisis for you might not be a crisis for someone else. All of that stuff that we have to take into consideration. So sometimes we make those calls based on how a student is presenting in front of us and how they're reporting, because sometimes they're going to be able to tell you what it feels like for them, even if the context doesn't feel as overwhelming to us, it might be for them. So we've put some resources on here that might be helpful for just reminding students to check in with if they're struggling. So if they're struggling with connection, there are those abilities to just talk with any kind of friends, putting yourself out there to meet new people, family members, Laker Life to get connected with clubs, organizations. And then some of the counseling services resources are on there as well. So Let's Talk isn't a counseling service, but it is a place where students can talk with a counselor and just have consultation. So we do recommend students start there if they're just unsure of what their first step is. They're feeling something, they're dealing with something, they don't really know how to go about it. It can be a good place to just talk it through and get some ideas. We have peer educators who are doing different types of programming. So our counseling outreach peer educators, COPE team, they offer a drop-in space that usually has an activity and something that students can engage in. And then I know the health peer eds through the Dean of Students office are also offering a lot of programming and drop-in spaces. So places that students can connect and feel connected. And then on top of that, just some things that we can offer and help bring some ideas to the table for students to try out. So I've included some of the resources on there that might be helpful for academic struggles, Office of Learning Services and Tutoring Center, Writing Center, all of the basics, since that stuff can contribute to it. For more moderate level of need, counseling services is obviously here to help someone who might be struggling and feeling really overwhelmed. The health center can be a good resource too if someone is unsure if something they're experiencing is mental health related or physical related. We see a lot of those somatic symptoms that arise. So for some, it's just getting peace of mind and going to make sure that something is checked out, to sit with somebody and listen to what they're experiencing. And then accessibility services, we know a lot of students have been struggling during this time and in need of different accommodations. So obviously that can be really useful for helping people to feel like they have some resources that could be helpful to them in the moment. Office of Dean of Students obviously has the emergency fund that students can access if any of their struggles are financial, and then can help with the accommodations and any kind of need when it comes to in and out of class. And then we've put some mental health resources on here as well. So Thriving Campus is a resource where we can connect students to off-campus services. So we have a contract with them and we're working together. So we're part of their network. But the students can see across, I believe, the entire country, depending on if they're sticking around the state or not, which campuses are participating in this and then which communities are offering some providers. So it's a good place to start if a student is struggling and maybe leaving campus or heading on a break, something like that, that might be useful for them where they're located. And then Psychology Today. And then we also have some off-campus mental health provider resources you can find on our website. And then we have a case manager who can help students to get connected at the counseling center. So if they're nervous to make the call because they don't really know what to say, our case manager can work with them to get connected and feel a little bit more comfortable doing that with somebody. And then lastly, and I think this is the one that I think a lot of people stress about, is that urgency and crisis, and hearing some of the big struggles that students experience. So the counseling center does have crisis appointments each day, Monday through Friday. So if students need to sit with somebody, they are feeling just very overwhelmed and cannot handle the situation that they're in, being able to connect them with the counseling center can be really important just to get grounded and to talk through options. So we've had faculty members who have been able to walk students over in times of crisis when they aren't sure that they're going to be able to do that on their own, or are just really hesitant to sit down with somebody for any number of reasons. It can be really helpful to have that kind of support. So either connecting them with a friend who can walk them over, or if you are able to, being able to stop over or at least make the call with them can be really helpful and supportive for students. We have an after hours crisis hotline that's available 24/7, even on holidays. So students can always call our office and get connected to a crisis counselor just by calling and pressing option number 2. And then we mentioned the Liberty Resources Mobile Crisis, which I think can be a really helpful resource, which is also 24/7, free and confidential. And they'll talk through options with students. And they have also done like at-home visits, essentially, where they'll come to the student directly to assess a situation if someone is unsure how they're doing.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just add with Liberty Resources, because I know many of us are coming from different places outside of this county too. They are in 5 counties. I think they're contiguous counties. So I think it's Madison, Oneida, Onondaga, Oswego, and Cuba counties. So just so you're aware. And there's mobile crisis resources, I think, in every county in New York State.
And yeah, and lastly, we put for imminent danger. So these are times where safety is a real concern. You don't trust that a student is going to keep themselves safe or keep someone else safe. There's a real sense of danger and urgency in that. So obviously UP is available and the extension is listed there, and then other emergency services in those specific times of need. So, okay, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to say for any of those.
No, the other thing I just reflected on is this also doesn't negate the incident reporting options through the Office of the Dean of Students. So I did want to just point out that although these, this is set up a little bit more, a little bit better for us to be able to be responsive at the moment. The Office of the Dean of Students also has the incident report forms. I think it's on the student conduct page, but that's an option too.
Right, and then we put our contact information. So if you are unaware or are just needing to give out any information to students, this is how they can reach us at different ways. So we've been trying to do more with social media just to get some information, updates, and then provide resources that way, just to reach students kind of where they're at. So they can follow those 2 accounts, which one is for the Counseling Center and the other is for our Counseling Outreach Peer Educator team. And then our contact information is listed there. So.
Yeah, and I'm mindful that we only have a few minutes left, but people might be anxious to get to the next thing. But I also wanted to just point out, so we were intentional about starting with faculty and staff resources and kind of starting with the conversation there and then switching to students, because we do want people to remain attentive to that whole concept of putting on your oxygen mask before putting it on your child. So being able to be attentive to really being able to care for yourself, not in lieu of other people, but so we can support other people. Because there's a lot on everybody here. So I'm wondering if there's anything that folks want to check in about, have questions about, recommendations for future stuff that we can maybe push for on our campus. And I want to thank Maggie and John for, I've seen everything that's being put out. I really liked the pandemic parenting Slack option, and it's really cool seeing the stuff that's coming out. And it's kind of a neat feel, even though I know CELT is very institutional, it is really present in kind of our culture here. It feels a little grassrootsy, which is always like a neat, I like that.
I want to say a few things. I work in environmental health and safety. A lot of people from facilities approach me for the mental issues. so mentally stressed out. So they asked where can they get help. So that's what. So I saw that EAP that you put the number that would be helpful. And is that the only one? It's for the staff.
Yeah, so EAP is set up to be specific for staff on our campus. It's not, I mean, I will say it's not a traditional EAP that you might experience in another workplace where they offer, counseling sessions associated with it, that type of thing, but they'll provide like the referral and try to offer the connection for resources and services either associated with your insurance or other things that might be available to folks. So EAP is the main one, and again, I feel very comfortable saying, like, if people can give us a little time, I'm always happy to consult with folks with seeking ideas of what might be available to them. Thank you.
I think that's all we got.
Any other questions for Kate or Kyle?
I just want to say thank you, because like you said earlier, sometimes just being heard helps.
Yes, thank you.
I'll need more of that. Yeah, and I am hopeful that folks can find more venues for us to connect and be able to share in the struggles that we're experiencing. Because maybe that's enough for us to kind of figure out what's the next step. How do I re-engage? How do I shift to something else, whatever that might be. It's a good rest of the day.
Stop sharing here.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.